Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hello, leader. Thank you for tuning into the Fierce Factor podcast. It's your host, Kaylee here, and today we are going to have a vital conversation for you, for me, for anyone in any industry who is desiring to expand their output in their business in any capacity. Meaning you may be a solopreneur who is wondering, where do I go from here? Do I continue as is? Do I scale up? Or do I sell? Or you might be fully staffed in your current model, but preparing for your expansion or exit and thinking about who you need to help you tackle that next move. P.S. If you are a fully booked aesthetic injector and you're asking yourself that question, really wondering what stage of business you're in and what your next move should be, we have an incredible new resource for you. We have developed a quiz that helps you understand where your strengths and weaknesses are in your growth model to determine if you're ready for that next big move. And you can head to take this quiz for free at klcconsultants.com/quiz. It's called our Aesthetic Scalability Quiz. And you can find out where your business stands within the 4 stages of business growth. Okay, so I have conversations weekly with business owners who ask themselves this question: is now the right time to hire? And how do I know? And while the answer to that question will vary depending upon the person asking it, the process for developing your strategy for hiring, or something we like to call your people plan, will be a very similar process across the board. Because building a people plan requires a 5-part framework that's focused less on the actual hiring of the people and more on your vision clarity for cultivating a brand where the people you do hire, the people you bring into your organization, are building the business for you, meaning each employee essentially pays for themselves and the next employee after them. So if you've listened to episode 67, The Quest to Find Your Mini-Me, you heard me talk about the challenge that has become increasingly potent post-pandemic as we face this great resignation and more injectors opening up their own businesses. I just pulled the most recent Aesthetic Society data, and guess what? No shock here. 2021 was a record year for our industry. Non-surgical procedures raked in nearly $4.5 billion. Yes, with a B, ladies, up almost an entire $1 billion from 2020. I'm literally mind blown about that. I just cannot. I want to fact check this data, but yes, the aesthetic industry generated over $9 billion total in revenue in 2020 during a pandemic. And P.S., just FYI, the top surgical procedure last year was liposuction. So if you want a copy of this report, head over to the Fierce Factor Society and Facebook. That's where we have kind of loading up all the resources to complement this podcast. We have the entire report there for you in our resources tab. So as we begin to look at this record advancement for our industry, there are really pros and cons for established providers like you. The pros being that demand is surging, so there is business for the taking. But of course, there's a con. More and more providers are jumping into the injectable game, increasing competition for non-surgical procedures that our industry, I will say, is essentially commoditizing with direct-to-consumer marketing, making the products and treatments the star of the show instead of the provider. And when I'm evaluating and forecasting trends, I always look to find current gaps. And here I can immediately see an opportunity. Already experienced and established injectors can truly become distinct in the marketplace because of this onslaught of new budding providers. And this is going to inevitably disproportionately outnumber the number of advanced injectors and industry leaders that are out there. Let me explain. So you've probably noticed your volume increasing, the demand essentially booming, post-COVID and beyond, right? A lot of folks thought this was restrained demand from patients who weren't able to be treated during lockdowns. And now we're seeing that this is continuing on and on. This growth is real. We are experiencing a very unique economic aftershock in which there's a pent-up cash extravaganza, meaning our US economy has had $2 trillion in savings and consumers are ready and willing to spend on personal care, wellness, and beauty. And so this is all great, right? We're doing well. This is wonderful. But like I mentioned, there's another unique nuance that's impacting this picture. And that's that more physician extenders are dipping their toe into the aesthetic game in response to this booming demand. And other very talented injectors who are fed up with working for a boss are starting to think about opportunities for freedom, flexibility, and autonomy in a new way. So you can expect your competition to go ahead and triple over the next 2 to 3 years. So we find ourselves in this really unique situation in which great injectors are in high demand, but at the same time, finding it increasingly difficult to service that demand at scale because of this chasm between new and experienced experts. And thanks to the onslaught of hospital nurses looking to start lucrative injecting careers, many of our Academy members are finding themselves being sought after by young injectors. So I hear things like clients having a knee-jerk reaction to start a training program or build an internship strategy. And for some, this is an ideal direction to go. But for others, for many of you who are already busting at the seams with responsibilities in your business, another initiative, another thing would take the business in a direction that would cause more pain and more exhaustion, not less. This past week, while I was on spring break vacation, I received an email from a client saying that a local injector called and asked her if she was hiring. And her first instinct was, well, always be recruiting. So of course I'm hiring if an A+ team member is jockeying me for a job, right? But then she really started crunching numbers and started to get serious. And so she sent me a note asking, Kaylee, is it the right time to hire? So that's what I want to explore with you today. I'm not going to whip out my fancy business calculator yet, but instead give you a higher level, a preliminary, if you will, framework to help you get some clarity around your hiring plan. So I'll break this framework into a series of 5 questions you can ask yourself in your journal to get you closer to unraveling the answer. Is it time to hire someone? So let's dive in. Question 1, what is the bigger goal for the business? What is the ideal timeline to accomplish that goal? So really 2 questions in one part. What's the bigger goal for the business? What's the ideal timeline to accomplish that goal? So in the scenario I shared with our client, her goal is to retire in 5 years. She's looking to sell the business after that time frame. So her goal is to simplify, to create a scalable, profitable business model that will show a buyer a lucrative infrastructure to invest in that can run independent of her. We have several clients in our academy that are solopreneurs and hiring their first team members. Their goal would be to create traction and leverage through a team to allow the business to create more top-line revenue with less work on behalf of the owner. So the answer to this question may be somewhere in the middle for you, but write down the question in your journal as a prompt and give yourself some time and space to really think about that answer. Question 2, do you need to hire support with this goal? The answer to this question is best initially defined by a secondary question, of course, which is what specific responsibilities will they be responsible for? So who do you need to hire to support with this goal, and what responsibilities will they be responsible for? So the reason this is so important is that we often think to ourselves, well, I'm fully booked and I can't possibly work more hours, so there's obviously enough business to begin delegating services to another provider. Then we put an ad out for an injector and the nightmare begins. 200 applicants on Indeed, a series of phone calls from inexperienced nurses asking to learn from you, a highly qualified Allergan trainer who's being undervalued at their current place of employment, right? The minute we thought we were totally clear about what we needed, the minute we finally mustered up the courage to make the big investment, the minute we took a deep breath and visualized the sweet space of freedom and cash reserves, things just got way more complicated. This is why so much of the impact work that needs to be done in the hiring process starts before the search even begins for your candidate. This means getting really clear about what that employee should be able to do and what you realistically will need to invest in them from a time and resource perspective to get them up and running at full speed. So this means be really honest with yourself about the cost of onboarding that employee when your variable costs are highest in the beginning, at the same time they are producing lower revenue values for you. Question number 3 is, what impact will this employee have on the business, both financial and emotional? This, leader, is a commonly overlooked part of this process because instantly we go to the place of, I need help, and then we onboard that employee. The integration starts off as more of a time suck than less. So we start to feel like the reprieve we were expecting isn't easing the burden, and we start to feel resentful. Some employees who are critical to your company will not be direct revenue producing. So we need to be realistic about their indirect and intangible impact on the company, on you. What will having that employee working behind the scenes to manage the schedule, cultivate relationships with clients, help with marketing and business development tasks, be your sounding board and partner? What will that mean for you? These are important questions to ask yourself and write down so you can look back and remind yourself of this when you forget. Question number 4, what is the annual profit that employee will produce for the organization? In the example I gave about our client who was exploring the opportunity with a new nurse asking for a job, of course she was flattered. Of course, if you fill out our fancy compensation calculator, you'll see that if that employee treats 10 patients a day, it'll make an additional $200K per year for the business. But what that spreadsheet can't predict is the cost it will take to double your patient flow, the emotional toll it will take on you as a provider, convincing patients to start seeing your new injector, and the timeline it will actually take to get that employee running at full speed. So do the math and get real about what having that employee will bring. You may have a plug and play opportunity and the employee will hit the ground running. Know your numbers. When you're doing this exercise for a non-revenue producing employee, you might consider the opportunity cost or gain, for that matter, of hiring an individual in this role. For example, what would delegating XYZ, write down the specific tasks, allow you to do more of? For example, hint, hint, working on your hiring plan and strategic business development. All right. A few weeks ago in our Confidence to Scale business certification program, we had a client tell the group that hiring a medical assistant increased her sales by $600,000 last year. Pretty incredible, right? And finally, question number 6, what needs to be in place for this to happen? So this is where I'll make a list of all the hiring resources, the internal resources, the external factors that need to be in place. So for example, is there a specific volume of clients or a demand for a specific treatment that we hit before we hire someone? Is there basic training that needs to be put in place or required of that employee before they begin the integration process into your business? Who can you enroll to support you with this process? When our clients fully flesh out these 6 questions, they usually have a really clear picture of what and who they need and can answer the question if it's time to hire. I will reinforce today that if you do not have a hiring plan in place, you absolutely need to work on this in your business as soon as possible. Waiting too long to hire can create a backlash or a boomerang effect because when we wait, we tend to settle or plug in people versus thinking methodically and strategically with clear intention about who we will need, what they specifically will produce for our business, and when to onboard them. Okay, leader, I hope this has been helpful for you. P.S. Don't forget to head over to klcconsultants.com/quiz, or you can access our quiz in the show notes or the link in my bio on Instagram to get some clarity around what stage of business you're in and if it's time for you to start this hiring process for your next rock star. All right, leader, thanks for tuning in, and I will chat with you next week. Wait, before you go, hey, if you're vibing with this conversation and you want to join me on my mission to help 100 inspiring and intentional women cross the next $1 million milestone in their business this year, or leader, maybe you want to become one of them, head over to Facebook and join our free community, the Fierce Factor Society. Over there, we're taking this conversation to an elevated level. Get access to resource guides, podcast supplements, guideposts, and direct communication with me, my expert team, and of course, a society of fierce women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetic wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to Facebook and search the Fierce Factor Society. See you there, goddess.